Hey everybody, how are you? We are going to do another video today. I'm kind of starting a new series though. Um, Most of the things I've been doing recently have been skills based and, like dosage calculation, things like that. I am going to start a series of anatomy and physiology videos. So today we're going to get started with that and we are going to go ahead and do an introduction video today and then there will be more to come. So let's get started with that. Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. Welcome to the human body. I do love the little tagline I found for this, which is built for movement, survival, and the occasional dance battle. But we will talk about this today. Nothing specific today, just an introduction and an overview. But I will be going into the specific body systems one by one. So, as always, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I can keep making these videos that way. So let's go ahead and get started. There are levels of organization to the human body. That is one of the kind of basic foundations in understanding anatomy and physiology. So to break that down and make it a little easier for you, I have this kind of, you call it flow chart. I don't know. But we do start with the atom, okay? And the atom is, of course, the tiniest little life cell that there is, or part of it's not a cell yet, but the tiniest little living thing that there is. Once you get a bunch of atoms together, then you create a molecule, okay? And this is how this flow chart kind of flows, so to speak. So you've got the atom, which is the itty bitty tiny living being. Put a bunch of those together, you have a molecule or a compound. Once you get a bunch of molecules or compounds together, you can wind up with an organelle. And an organelle, which literally translates into little organ, is what you see inside of a cell. It's the mitochondria, if you remember from like high school, right? The mitochondria and the lysosomes and all those good things. So, of course, then that means if you get a bunch of cells together or organelles together, you have a cell. Okay. Put a bunch of cells together, you will wind up with tissue, in this case, body tissue, not tissue used to wipe your nose with. Put a bunch of tissues together, you wind up with an organ. Put a bunch of organs together, you get a whole organ system. And if you put a whole bunch of organ systems together, guess what? You've got us, a human. Okay. So let's kind of just go back through that. Atoms, tiny. Lump them together, you get a molecule. Lump them together, organelle. Lump them together, cell. Lump cells together, tissue. Lump tissues together, organ. Organ to organ systems, organ system to organism. There you go. That's the level of organization for the human body. That is the basic foundation for what we are made of. Okay. All right, there are several body systems. Okay, talked about organization. There's several body systems. And like I said, as I build this particular series of videos, we will go through every one of these body systems. Some of them in parts because they're very lengthy. So starting with the integumentary system, I like to call the integumentary system the spa system because it deals with skin, hair, and nails. Um, the integumentary system, the anatomy of it is the skin, hair, the nails, and then, of course, all the associated glands, like sweat glands and oil glands and things like that. It functions to protect us and to regulate some of our body functions, like heat and therefore cooling. Okay? The skeletal system. The skeletal system is comprised of bones, ligaments, and cartilage. That, of course, helps to support us. Because if we didn't have our skeletal system, we'd just be a big pile of goo on the floor. Protect our internal organs. Bones store minerals. and is also the site of blood cell production. So the skeletal system does quite a bit more than people think it does. Next, we have the muscular system. The anatomy of the muscular system is all the skeletal muscle and the tendons. Tendons, of course, attach bone to muscle or muscle to bone, however you want to look at that. Where ligaments, what we were talking about in the skeletal system, attach bone to bone. The function of the the muscular system is to provide movement and also heat production. Every time our muscles contract, they produce heat. All right, on to the respiratory system. Respiratory system consists of the nose, the pharynx, which is otherwise known as the throat, the larynx, the voice box, the trachea, the windpipe, the bronchi, which are these little branchy guys right here, and the lungs themselves. This system functions to perform gas exchange, so oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, and also regulates the pH or the balance of our bodies. The digestive system. The digestive system contains or consists of the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, or what some some books actually call the food tube. Yeah, I love that. The stomach, the intestines, and the accessory organs thereof. So things like the liver and the pancreas and the gallbladder and stuff like that. The digestive system functions to digest our food, absorb the nutrients from it, and then eliminate wastes or whatever's left over so it does not get built up in our body. The cardiovascular system is made up of the heart, the blood, arteries, veins, and capillaries. And as you'll notice in this picture, and when I go over cardiovascular separately, anytime you see a diagram in a book where there's veins or arteries or blood of any kind, you're going to have blue and red, just so you're aware. We don't have blue blood. Well, rich people do, I guess, but we don't have blue blood. Blue represents deoxygenated blood, which is primarily in the veins, and red represents oxygenated blood, which is primarily in the arteries, just so you know. I always like to point that out because people go, well, but my blood, where's the blue blood? It's not there. This system functions to transport blood and other materials that are within the blood to and from body cells. The urinary system consists of kidneys, ureters. So you've got kidneys, ureters. That's what comes out of the kidneys here. The urinary bladder, and then the urethra. And on a male, this is longer. On a female, it's shorter. It functions to form urine, excrete urine, and therefore, in doing that, regulate the blood volume and composition in our bodies. Because blood is primarily made up of water. So, reproductive systems, and I say systems because there are two, the male and the female. In the female, this consists of ovaries, fallopian tubes, the vagina, and the vulva, and the uterus. I did not include the uterus there. I apologize. So you've got ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, vagina, and then this whole thing is called the vulva. In the male, we have testes, epididymes, which are on top of the testes, vas deferens, prostate is back behind. This is the bladder. It's just in there for purpose glands, and then the penis. Both function to produce cells, ova for the females, sperm for the males, produce hormones, and then, of course, facilitate reproduction. The endocrine system, the anatomy are hormone-producing glands. This is why we have this one broken into male and female again. And their primary functions are to secrete hormones and then regulate body functions. So if you notice here, the female and the male, everything is the same until you get to the gonad area where the hormone secreting glands for the male are the testes and the female are the ovaries. You'll notice that a lot of these systems kind of have crossover where they share structures but work independently for the different systems. Okay, the nervous system. The nervous system consists of the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, and the sensory receptors that are associated with those nerves. This system functions to coordinate and control body functions and enables the brain to function too. All right, let's talk about some directional terms. Direction is very important, or directional terms rather, very important in the medical field because this is how we speak. This is our language. And we'll see this also documented. You'll hear your providers speak this way. So it's good to understand these and understand what they mean. So let's start with anterior. Anterior or ventral, they are interchangeable, means front. Okay, so anything that's towards the front is anterior or ventral. The opposite being anything that is towards the back is posterior or dorsal. Okay, so towards the back. Superior or cephalic is anything that is towards the head or up. Inferior, or what is also known as caudal, which I did not put here, I apologize, is anything down or towards the feet. Medial is towards the middle, while lateral is towards the side. Proximal is closer to the point of attachment or origin, while distal is further from the point of attachment or origin. So directional terms are a little tricky in that everything relates to something else, and it depends on what you are actually speaking of in relation to something else. So for instance, okay, medial, yes, may mean towards the middle of the body. But guess what? If you're talking about the arm, the medial side of the arm is right here towards the inside of the arm, or what I like to call the pinky side. Okay, because remember, anatomical position, how we name all of these, how we look at all of this, is just like this figure is here. Standing forward, palms facing forward. That's anatomical location. Also, too, very important, remember, left and right on your patient is not your left and right. So when we're doing things that have to deal with left and right, when we're documenting things that we did on either the left or the right, when we're doing, say, EKGs that require left and right, make sure that you remember it is your patient's left and right, not yours. Because when you're looking at a patient, it is opposite. And trust me, I have messed this up plenty of times. I even get to the point where I have to do the L thing and kind of turn myself to see, okay, it's fine. There's no shame in that, okay? But just always, always, always remember that. There's also what are considered the body planes. And this divides top and bottom, front and back, left and right. Okay, and they have names as well. So this red kind of plate here that is dividing straight through the middle of the body, which is then dividing the body into left and right sides, is called the sagittal plane. The green here that is going through this way and dividing the body into front and back, or anterior and posterior, or ventral and dorsal, is called the frontal or coronal plane. Okay. The one that goes through the middle, which separates top and bottom, or superior and inferior, or cephalic and cloidal, is called the transverse plane, or the horizontal axial plane. Oh, I am so sorry. Just whacked my desk. Um, I have a couple ways to remember some of these. So transverse is across. That's kind of how you remember that one. I've always remembered the other name for frontal being coronal, and coronal to me sounds like Corona, like the beer. And so if you drink too many Coronas, you're going to fall flat on your face or flat on your back. That's how I remember that. Just remember in the medical field, however you decide to remember things, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody but you. I'm just saying. All right. We also divide the body up into body cavities. Okay. So here are our body cavities. We have the cranial cavity. Cranial cavity, of course, houses our cranium, which holds our brain. Okay. Because remember, a cavity is just an empty space. There is an entire area, the whole back of the body is known as the dorsal cavity. Okay. That includes the cranial cavity and the spinal cavity, because the spinal cavity is where the spine is housed. So the spinal cavity and the cranial cavity are both known as the dorsal cavity. Conversely, the front of the body is known as the ventral cavity, and the ventral cavity houses the thoracic cavity, which is the chest area that houses the heart and lungs, the abdominal cavity that houses the stomach, the intestines, a good portion of everything else that's in the trunk of the body, and then the pelvic cavity, which houses part of our urinary system and a good portion of the reproductive organs. We also then lump the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity together and call it the abdominopelvic cavity and make that one big area. Yes, this is medicine. It can't be simple. It's just how it is. Okay, so let's go through those again. Dorsal cavity houses the spinal cavity and the cranial cavity. Thoracic cavity is the thoracic cavity. Abdominal cavity is the abdominal cavity. Pelvic cavity is the pelvic cavity. Put the pelvic and abdominal cavity together and you have the abdominopelvic cavity. Put the thoracic and abdominopelvic together and you have the ventral cavity. You can always back the video up if you didn't get that the first time. It's crazy. I know. All right. We also have quadrants that we divide the abdominal cavity in. Okay. And again, this just further solidifies what I said about your patient's left and right. As you are looking at this, you're like, wait, that's the right. No, that is your right. That is his left. Okay. So there are four quadrants, of course, quad meaning four. The right upper quadrant, the left upper quadrant, the left lower quadrant, and the right lower quadrant. These can all be abbreviated as well as RUQ, RLQ, LUQ, and LLQ. Okay. Just as a little kind of food for thought, here is how that's divided as far as how it looks with internal organs. This is helpful because a lot of times when a patient comes in and says, I have pain in my abdomen, usually they'll say stomach, and the stomach's actually way up here, and they'll point down here, but everybody calls this whole thing a stomach for some reason. Anyway, that has always bugged me. They're going to point to where it's hurting. You will then document where that is. Is it the left upper quadrant? Is it the right lower quadrant? Where is it? Because based on that, that can help the doctor or the provider diagnose because of where things are, right? A perfect example is people that have right lower quadrant pain right here. A lot of people always just kind of jump to, oh my God, it's probably their appendix because that's where the appendix is. Okay. So this is always good to know as well, just to kind of have a good idea of where things are located. Now we can further break down this area and look at regions. There are 9 regions. So if you want to be super specific about where things are, and rather than just have the 4 kind of general quadrants, you can have 9 regions. And the 9 regions are as follows. You have a right and left hypochondriac region. We'll get back to that word in a minute. You have the epigastric region. You have a right and left lumbar, the umbilical, right and left iliac, and the hypogastric. Now, here's why these are called what they are. Epigastric, epi means above, gastric means stomach. This region, part of it is above the stomach, so therefore it is above the stomach, epigastric. Umbilical refers to where the umbilical cord was when you were born, which is where your belly button is now, so that's why that is the umbilical region. Hypogastric means hypo, which means below, gastric, which is stomach, so that is hypogastric. Okay. The iliac is the crest on the top part of your like hip bone, pelvic bone where the hip is. So that is why that is called the left and right iliac. Lumbar refers to the back, the portion of your lower back that is around the side here. So that is why that is lumbar. Hypochondriac. People always ask me about that one because students always ask me about it because it's like, wait, isn't a hypochondriac somebody who thinks they're sick all the time? It is. However, in this particular case, hypo means below, ac means basically pertaining to, and then chondria is refers to the ribs. So it means it's below pertaining to the ribs if you really did it specifically as it is said, but that's why that is called hypochondriac. All right. That is all I have for overview on the introduction to anatomy and physiology. Please stay tuned for the upcoming videos on the anatomy and physiology specific body systems. And again, if you haven't, please click the like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much.